Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar Talking Tech. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items with you so you know how to participate in today's event. You've joined the presentation listening to your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. It's now my pleasure to introduce your speakers, Petra, Director of Marketing and Consumer Intelligence, and Norbert, Global Strategic Insights.
Yeah, hello everybody. This is Norbert here. It's my pleasure to have you today. I think we have 60 exciting minutes ahead of us talking about tech and the tech markets. And yeah, the greatest thing is I'm not alone today. So I'll have Petra with me and she will also have a few words to you in the beginning.
So just a second. Now it works. Okay. So hello from my side as well. My name is Petra. I work in the marketing and consumer intelligence team where I deal with consumer trends and the behavior of specific target groups. And we will talk a lot about the consumer today, as COVID-19 has shifted much of our lives from outside the home to inside home. And we will talk about these shifts and what they mean and what this means for the future of tech especially. So a lot of the data we show you today is based on our GfK Consumer Life study. That's a large consumer trend study that we conduct in 25 countries. And just a second. And this study delivers insights about all aspects of consumers' lives, consumers' values, their attitudes, their behavior, their lifestyles. And in 2020, we conducted an additional tech and digital lifestyle module that delivers insights about tech innovations, gaming, wearables, media, and much more. So now I hand over to Norbert.
All right, and to deliver the full picture, on the left-hand side, you can actually see also what, whenever you hear me talking, I will be more talking about the GfK Market Intelligence sales tracking data. So this is basically the retail sales data on the tech markets. So what was actually sold, the actual behavior, while Petra is more talking about the consumer attitudes. So this will be kind of our part. We will always start and stop talking once the other person is stopping. And I will stop quickly the camera now. But first of all, let's start with the actual market and where we stand today. So how are the tech and durable markets developing? This is, of course, kind of my part now because we talk about hard figures and look back into 2020 on how the markets have performed. And you can see here how strong of a V shape we can see in the market. So strong recovery ever since April, and particularly the second half year was a super strong growth year, especially in the European and EMEA region. And why is that the case? Why were we able to end up in January to December, that's the very right-hand side bar, with a +2% globally in the tech and durables markets, right? And just to remind you, these are the smartphones, computers, home appliances, office equipment, consumer electronics, all of that together. How was that possible? Well, in the end, it was due to Corona and not despite, because tech was really a very, very important solution for us all being at home, right? And we had to work and learn from home, and all these appliances and all these products and all these devices helped us with that. Also to communicate, socialize in distance, so to speak, because we couldn't meet each other. all around the year at least. And to enjoy home, since we have to spend so much time at home, we want to be entertained, and if we can only be entertained at home, these products help us a lot. And when we are at home, we also have to eat, we have to clean, we have to cook, and whatever products help us to simplify that has been extremely appreciated. But is everything the same? I mean, this is the global picture, but I can tell you no. When we look into different regions, and here you can see a split between the developed markets and emerging markets. And when we talk about developed markets, that's basically developed Europe and developed Asia, countries like Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore. You can see how much the investment mode is visible here in those developed markets. Actually, developed markets were hit much harder in terms of number of infections by COVID than the emerging Asian markets, at least. But still, you can see the investment mode kicked in. People spent a lot of money into their homes, and this resulted even in a double-digit growth rate for the EMEA region. For the developed markets, a +8%. Emerging markets, on the other hand side, have, of course, somewhat lower paying parity, and that means also that they have more difficulties once due to COVID, there are any income restrictions that they're facing. And so they much more quickly go into saving mode rather than investing mode. And hence the performance still recovering in the second half year, but with a -4, definitely not as strong. So this is the big picture of how the markets went in 2020. The continuum on the trend you can see is very much upward. The demand is still very high, and you will, and this is also still true for the beginning of 2021. Well, what are we going to talk about today in detail, right? I already touched a little bit on it, but it will be about work and education, about entertainment, about health and fitness for sure. These are kind of three topics that we will touch upon. But when we think about a consumer as a whole, there is another 2 topics which concern all of that, which is the sustainability and the effect on the shopping of COVID. And here we will start with the digital lifestyle and tech adoption for the education at home, work and education at home. And what you can see on the next slide again is like hard sales figures from the second half year of 2020, again for the total tech and durable markets. And what you can see in this little box above the bar is always the additional billion US dollars spent on the category. So for example, 8.6 billion more US dollars spent on notebooks, 3.9 billion on tablets, 1.6 billion more spent on monitors. So all of that shows us how strong this working and learning at home development has pushed the markets. Also in relative terms, categories like monitors even grew by almost 50% compared to last year. So very, very significant. But now what does it mean from the consumer side working at home, Petra? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Of course. So let's have a look. So for many people, the way they work has changed dramatically over the past year. You can see here that 54% of European consumers worked or studied from home at least once a week. But of course, this does not apply to all people because not everyone has the opportunity to work from home. So it's interesting, who are the people that work from home? And you can see here that it's rather males, rather people with a higher education and at least a college degree, rather millennials and younger generations working from home, and couples with children, because of course many schools were closed, and I guess probably many of you experienced the challenges of working from home with children. Another interesting aspect from my point of view is that above average people that live in urban areas work from home. And this is one thing that probably may change in the future when remote work is getting more attractive, and then it's more attractive to live in the countryside. We did a consumer research in the last year on the topic of home office in several European countries, and the results of this study show that home office fits very well with people's lifestyle. So 2/3 of the people who worked from home particularly appreciate the fact that their daily commute is reduced. But on the other hand, working from home has some disadvantages. So, for instance, it reduces team working opportunities, it blurs the boundary between work and personal life, and it makes it harder to switch off and to take a break. And home office leads to less sociable work relationships. But nevertheless, a large proportion of respondents in our studies say they would like to continue working from home. 72% of Germans, 74% of British, and even 84% of French. So the interesting question is, will remote work stay in the future or not? And according to many experts, people will probably not work completely from home in the next few years, but the proportion of time people spend working from home will increase. And such a hybrid model has definite advantages for companies. So studies show that work hours increased by 15% when people work at home. And another benefit is that companies can now recruit talent from all over the world, because it doesn't matter where your office is. And many companies have recognized this, including Cisco. And Twitter and Microsoft already announced that they will be focusing more on such hybrid working models in the future. And this will also require new office concepts in the future. People will ask themselves more often, is there a reason to go to the office or keep an appointment in person? So companies need to create a working environment that makes it worthwhile to travel to work. But what does it mean for you as a manufacturer and or retailer in terms of tech solutions? There will be a continuous need for technical devices that facilitate the home office. This requires new concepts and creative ideas. It's not necessarily always means new products that have to be invented. It's rather about understanding what consumers need and offering solutions to their problems. So I would like to give you some examples. For example, imagine you want to take part in an important video conference without being disturbed. ADM offers a new option for its Wi-Fi router that's useful in this case. You could activate the option, prioritize this device, and as long as this option is active, this device is given priority over all other devices when using the internet. Another solution is offered by Lootbox. Lootbox offers a smart charger box, and this is a good solution for users that want to keep their devices organized when they are powered up. So this solution helps to maintain an organized and streamlined experience in the home. And Logitech, last but not least, offers this multi-device keyboard that works with your tablet and smartphone.
All right, let's move to the health and fitness trend, right? We talked about office, but now it's about the healthier lifestyle. And how, did that change COVID? And of course, we had to change the way we do our workout or fitness. And smart equipment really helps us with that. For example, 14% of European consumers, they really plan to buy a smart workout equipment in the next few years. And we can already see that today, right? In our sell-out data that we are capturing here at GfK, we could clearly see that globally, 37% of growth in the sales for core wearables, and this includes fitness trackers, smartwatches in 2020. So clearly, when you can't do the team sports, then you try to monitor and track yourself and your progress that you're doing in your fitness activities. Another aspect of of health, and is of course also the air that you're breathing. And we see incredible growth in air cleaners, for example, and not so much in some of the Asian countries where air pollution is getting better, fortunately, but particularly in Europe, where this concept is a bit newer and more people try to get these kind of appliances. Of course, one reason being COVID crisis, and we all know about the issues with the virus. So people are keen to really live, since they also spend so much more time at home, in a clean environment. What is Samsung, for example, doing on the topic of health and fitness? So it brought the health platform on smart TVs with content, instruction videos, and for sure, when we look at CES and what they were presenting there is more to come on this smart TV fitness apps and fitness support. But what about apps in general?
Yeah.
Petra?
Apps are transforming health and fitness. We can see this in our figures. So people are increasingly using apps to track their fitness, to monitor their vitals, their sleep, and their nutrition. In Q1 and 2 in 2020, downloads of health and fitness apps increased by 25% in Europe and even by 46% worldwide. And it's especially the younger generation of Gen Z and Millennials who make use of these tools. Approximately 1/4 of them have used apps for tracking exercise and fitness in the last month. And even before the pandemic, self-care was already an important issue. And mindfulness is a huge topic. It's becoming most important in a time of permanent stimulation in our digital age. And the pandemic gives health a whole new meaning. It made people realize how vulnerable they are and how important health is in life. And the acceptance of smart home healthcare has also increased. The pandemic influences the way people communicate with their doctor. The OECD published a health report, and according to this report, the use of teleconsultations increased greatly during the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, in France, the number of teleconsultations reached close to 1 million per week in April 2020. And in the week before March, there were only around 10,000. So that's an incredible increase. And our GfK Consumer Life study shows that 32% of European consumers are interested in smart home products that collect or transfer health data to healthcare providers. And 47% of European consumers find AI or computerized doctors that can diagnose health issues 24/7 appealing. And such new solutions can lead to better accessibility to physicians and a faster diagnosis. And there are already very interesting tech solutions in this area. So for instance, researchers at a German university are currently working on an app that compares the voice patterns of people with and without corona infection using neural networks. And according to the researchers, the app has currently already a hit rate of more than 80%. And there are already skin screening apps that allow the diagnosis of skin cancer. Overall, the interest of Europeans in these topics is already high, but compared to other countries, Europeans are still more reserved when it comes to these new technical health services. Nevertheless, I guess it's unlikely that we will abandon these new technologies after the pandemic and return to business as usual.
Absolutely, Petra. So I think let's move now from this more serious health topic to the entertainment topic, right? This is also good for our health, I believe. And let's move again to some hard numbers. And we have seen some of those, but now let's take a look at it from the angle of entertainment. Particularly TVs, we can see also quite a strong growth. And a growth of almost $4 billion US, headsets as well. And we should also look at it in an angle of gaming, because this has been one of the strongest trends also caused by Corona. And on the right-hand side, you can clearly see how the gaming part, the blue bars, are performing versus the non-gaming part of the markets. And clearly, gaming has boosted these segments a lot. Be it notebooks, be it desktop PCs, be it monitors in particular, or headsets. Whenever you have a gaming functionality, this was boosted quite a lot. But the center of our living room still is the TV, right? And the display, the big display that is helping us entertaining. And there was quite some movement back to entertain at home via our TVs in the last half year. And hence, let's talk about TVs for a second. Right, what was really entertaining at home, and what was the entertainment at home really drove the sales, and it particularly moved into the premium TVs for more immersive experiences. Of course, we want to see better picture quality. Better gaming played also quite a role for TVs, and immersive experiences and better audio. To give you some examples, better picture quality, sales of QLED TVs, they rose by 44%. Better gaming, so what we call GPU sync equipped televisions, were really strong on the rise. They basically doubled. And what that means, or what is actually a GPU sync, this is a functionality, it's called FreeSync or G-Sync, being from AMD or NVIDIA, that is synchronizing your GPU, so your graphic card, with the TV so that the display is seamlessly shown, there is no lag and there is no interruption when playing. This is quite important for gamers, of course, when they play on the TV. And it's not a niche anymore. It's roughly 10% of the total global market, 20% in Europe already. And we talk about an average price of a GPU sync equipped television of roughly 1,500 euros. So a truly rising star on the premium side of the market. Yeah, immersive, the consoles are of course contributing to that, and the consoles growth in Europe also 30%. Immersive experiences with 70+ inch, so it's always about the size, and more immersive experience with larger sizes is pretty strong, plus 62%. And also audio is playing a more and more important role. So we know that picture quality is on top of mind when it comes to purchase decision for TVs, but actually audio is the only factor that is actually rising in the consumer's perception of their reasons to buy a TV. So all of those show really strong growth rates, right? While overall, when we take a look at the global TV market, we see it being flat at 0% growth. So clearly in Europe, these kind of features were strongly in demand and really drove the premium market, while in other countries like China, for example, the demand was much more sluggish for TVs overall in general. But how did the consumer behavior actually go, Petra, when it comes to TV and consumption of media?
Yeah, let's have a look. So the pandemic's also changing the purpose of technology and the way we use it. The time people spend in front of the screen is increasing because they can't go to concerts or to restaurants, and the way people watch TV changes as well. So streaming services are the big winners of the pandemic. 31% of Europeans subscribed to a streaming service last year. The use of streaming services is particularly high, as you can see at this map, in North America, in Sweden, and it's least common in Russia. And it's especially young people that prefer these streaming services with the exclusive offers, and these streaming services are really attractive for this target group. 48% of Gen Z use such offers. And streaming providers as Disney Plus, Amazon, or Netflix offer already co-watching services like Group Watch, for instance, which allow people to watch a program together and sharing their reactions with emojis. And this is something that could be possibly stay in a post-corona era because younger generations already shifted their lifestyle to general more online instead of meeting in real life. Tech helps to bring people together, but nevertheless, we spend a lot of time alone. This leads to an increase in loneliness, and currently mental health is a huge issue. We conducted a study in the US, and the study shows that 48% of US Americans state that isolation is the #1 effect of Corona. And in this situation, technology and communication media such as Skype, WhatsApp, or social media help people keep in touch with their friends and family. 50% of Europeans say that they depend on technology to connect them to other people and the world. And the use of social media has increased tremendously. What's new about this is the role of gaming. We have already seen in the sales figures that gaming products are showing high growth rates. But games are not just a pastime in a pandemic. They're also taking on a new role in social interaction, and industry experts believe that gaming is quickly becoming the new social network. And as you can see in the figures, that already 24% of European consumers watch other people play video games on social media platforms like YouTube, and 12% broadcasted their gameplay on social media platforms. Overall, that doesn't sound like much, but if we look at individual age groups, we find that in Gen Z, a good half of people watch others play games on social networks. So we've talked a lot about how the home life is changing because of COVID and what that means for new technologies. Now we'd like to shed some light on another important trend that's playing an increasingly large role in consumers' purchasing decisions, and that's the topic of sustainability. Global warming or climate change is a social concern that has risen dramatically in recent years. In fact, it's the fastest growing personal concern since 2015. It's the #1 concern in many European countries and #2 in Germany and Sweden. And environmental pollution also remains steady as a #2 concern in Europe, underscoring how important the environment now is to a greater proportion of the Europeans.
Right. So that's the attitude, right? But are people actually doing that? Are they actually purchasing more sustainable products? Well, at least according to the energy label, which you can see here on the bottom right-hand side, yes, they are doing that because the share of the highest energy efficiency label classes, the A++, A++, has massively increased, as you can see, from 13% in 2013 to, yeah, basically the top 2 ones, like almost being 2/3 of the market in 2020. So yes, energy label is very attractive. Consumers are striving to really buy such products. Also, when we ask consumers around the world, they say, yes, I bought an appliance with high energy efficiency rating. And that's particularly true in Western Europe, where we do see that kind of labels, and also North America, but also other regions are catching up here. However, we have to also look at the reality and understand that it's not the only decision-making factor. And actually, when we are true to ourselves, what is more important to consumers is the performance of products, and in that case, particularly capacity of products. So on the left-hand side, you can see how large refrigerators, large washing machines, large cooking appliances have been rising in their market share significantly. Most significant example may be the washing machines with more than 9 kilogram capacity, making up 41% of all revenues in that market in 2020, up from 17. So it is super important that the benefits are there for the consumer, that the performance of the product is improving. At the same time, if they understand that these are efficient products, they will buy them. However, you need or we need to bring together both the benefit and the sustainability. Otherwise, consumers will not purchase such products. Yeah, and Petra also has a little bit on the new energy label, right?
Yes, right. So let's have a look. What does the new energy label mean for manufacturers and consumers? The new energy label is in place in Europe since March, and its main purpose is to make it easier to assess which appliances really do require less energy. The fact that almost all appliances were recently in the best classes made it almost impossible for consumers to distinguish between them. And we know from a consumer study that we conducted that the vast majority of Germans say that the energy label influences their purchase decision because it helps to save energy or water and to protect the environment. And for you as a manufacturer, the new label has created new incentives to develop energy efficient devices. But there's still work to be done in terms of communication and education about the new energy label. At the beginning of March, we asked consumers in Germany whether they had heard about the change in the energy label. And the good news is that 77% of consumers have heard about it. But on the other hand, 56% of German consumers have heard about the new energy label but didn't understand the change, or they didn't even hear about the change. So it's clear that consumers need information about the changes. And where do they look for this information? And you can see this in the great bars here. They looking for information in TV. They expect information from manufacturers or from retailers, information in magazines or newspapers, and on special websites. So if you see these figures here, then there's still a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Petra. So how does this all actually have an impact on our buying behavior? I think that's the question, right? We've seen so many impacts of COVID, but I think what was the real strongest influence, external shock, so to speak, was the influence on e-commerce, right? We all experienced lockdowns, and we all experienced how we had to shop online, and that had a significant effect in 2020. And on the left-hand side, you can see the actual revenue shares of online versus offline, or actually you only see the online shares, which in 2019 were roughly a quarter, while in 2020 we moved to 1/3. So incredible growth rates pushed by COVID, sometimes as a necessity. There was no way to shop otherwise. But the question is, how will that stay, or will that go back to kind of pre-COVID normal? First indication that we get is when we look at the different regions. And the orange bar tells us about the year 2020 and how much the e-commerce share is. And you can see a huge uplift of those shares in basically every region, be it the more developed markets in terms of e-commerce like China or Western Europe, but also in some less developed countries in terms of online share, like Middle East or emerging Asia. The market shares are rising very, very significantly. When we go into a little bit more detail even and look at the individual months, like the last 5 months, and in orange dotted line, you can see the 2019 benchmark. We can clearly see that basically every month, for example, in Western Europe is above that benchmark, and not just a little bit, but quite substantially. And even in months like August, where we didn't have many restrictions in our retail or our daily lives in Western Europe, that was still increasing massively, which is a clear hint that this is a non-reversible development, and people got used to shopping online, and they also understood and liked the benefits. And this is exactly, I think, the key point. Is it a good experience to shop online? And when we asked the consumers who are actually doing a purchasing transaction, when we asked them, how would you recommend the retailer that you shopped at, we found out quite surprisingly, I would say, that even a higher percentage on the left-hand side, you can see that, recommended the online retailer. While, I mean, on the right-hand side, 42% recommended their purchase at the offline retailer. So clearly, when people shopped and had to shop online, the experience was good. They were satisfied. And when that is the case, we can expect that such behavior will be repeated. Looking into the online market in Europe specifically, and looking at the different players that we have here, being the traditional retailer online shops. So the online shop of the MediaMarkt in Germany or the Darty in France. Here we saw the biggest growth rates, while the pure online players had a significant, a strong year this year, but not as strong as the online shops of the traditional retailer. And in fact, this time in Europe, for the first time, we recorded higher sales, more revenue for those traditional retail online shops. Why? I mean, it's clear. When you can't go to the traditional retailer and there is a lockdown, you go to the traditional retailer, but to the online shop. And that's what happened. And that's what brought a lot of people to the platforms of the traditional retail online shops. What does it mean for the post-COVID retail scene? A lot, I believe. Omnichannel will be the key point and will be the key differentiating point in the next 3 to 5 years, according to my opinion. So to connect on and offline world will be more important than ever. The traditional retail online shops will have to make sure to keep their clients on their platform, while the pure online players for sure have understood that they also need to reach out to more touch points with the consumers, talking about pickup points, potentially pick up stores at other stores, corporations. So a lot is innovation is happening on that front of omnichannel. And for sure, for the future, that will be decisive. And I know that Petra has a couple of very good examples of how these experiences are evolving.
Yes. With the increasing relevance of online shopping, new shopping formats and channels are emerging on the internet. Social media shopping, for example, is a topic that's becoming increasingly relevant. 17% of European consumers use so-called buy buttons on social media, and 13% click on shoppable posts on social networks like Instagram. Again, this doesn't sound like much, but if we take a closer look at the figures, it becomes clear that young consumers in particular are really enthusiastic about this type of shopping. 30% of Gen Z and 23% of millennials in Europe already use these buy buttons. But Asian consumers are clearly a little bit ahead in the future here. Even 60% of consumers in China use buy buttons, and 42% of Chinese click on shoppable posts. And live streaming commerce is experiencing a boost, especially in China and Asia. Taobao is one of the largest platforms in Asia, and they estimate that live streaming will generate more than 500 million sales transactions in 2021. New technologies such as AR and VR also have the potential to reshape shopping. Still, brick and mortar retail has the advantage over online retail that customers can touch and try the products. And customers often still go to the store because they want to be advised and they need recommendations from the sales staff. In this respect, there's still potential in online retail to become better here. Therefore, I think there's an interesting solution that has been presented on the CES this year. Paradigm is a startup from Tokyo, and they presented an augmented streaming solution that allows online shoppers to virtually touch products and get more information about them. The aim is to offer a digital shopping experience similar to that in a store. The video search function can also be integrated into live stream shopping, and viewers can virtually touch an item of clothing like this jacket here shown on their smartphone and call up more information about it.
All right, so experiences matter, right? But what does it mean for our opportunities tomorrow? Let's take a look at the sales data again. And let's take a look back into 2020, where we talked about in the EMEA region, a growth of 11%. What is driving that? I think very clear from that picture, whatever is further up north. So IT and small domestic appliances drove it the most. However, when we look to the right-hand side, the further to the right-hand side, the sectors are the biggest ones. So telecom was actually lagging behind in the EMEA region, but still a growth of 11%, quite strong. Let's now move into 2021 and see how the demand develops. And quite interestingly, we see even stronger demand in January 21 compared to the year 2020. So the dynamic of strong demand continues. It's again still IT and small domestic appliances, also major domestic appliances joining the growth, and telecom as the biggest part of the market also moving upwards in terms of more growth than last year. So that's good news for the markets, right? We see that a lot of demand is there, and we have to say it is despite some lockdowns happening, right? In Germany, lockdowns, we saw all kinds of restrictions in retailing around in this region. Not completely, of course, like in the first lockdowns, but a plus of 17% in this kind of retail environment is more, I would say, than significant. And it tells us the strong story about the needs of people and how these needs are not just short-term, but for sure mid to long-term changing. And even more long-term, Petra, I think that's your word there.
Yes, let's look into the future. So what's about the long-term prospects for new technologies? And in our consumer life study, we asked people what solution they find appealing to become part of everyday life in the next 20 years. And first, technical solutions that support interaction and social exchange with other people are very attractive. 60% of respondents would like language translation software, for example. But it's also interesting that 37% of consumers would like to have a personal digital assistant that can talk to them and respond to their needs and emotions. This is a result of a smart home study from recent years. So it shows that smart speakers, for example, have the potential to become companions or even therapists for the consumers. People want to be able to have a real conversation with them and to discuss their problems. Or they would like that their smart speaker asks them how they are, motivates them, or cheers them up when they are in a bad mood. We talked about mental health and the feeling of loneliness earlier, and in this context, smart speakers can have an interesting role. On the right-hand side of this chart, you can see that also household robots that fully automate chores are very attractive to consumers. For instance, we see that vacuum cleaning robots are already very successful. However, this is not about losing complete autonomy. Unpleasant tasks such as cleaning or chopping vegetables like onions, they can happily be done by robots. But a fully automated kitchen that takes over the fun stuff, the mixing of ingredients and cooking completely, this is something only 39% of Europeans would like to see. So there's a tension between automation on the one side and autonomy on the other side. And this brings us to the barriers that technology manufacturers and retailers should consider in order to be successful. 66% of Europeans are initially skeptical when a new product is launched and rather prefer to wait until new products are proven to work well. To reduce the skepticism, you could organize product demonstrations in retail, for instance, or a money-back guarantee for your products. A second issue is data protection. This is extremely important in Europe. 55% of consumers state that privacy records are very important. So you should be very transparent about how consumers' personal data is handled and give data protection the top priority. And last but not least, price plays a major role, of course. So 49% of consumers would buy more technical products if they could afford them. And here it's particularly important for you when you launch new innovations to identify these consumer groups that are more tech savvy and are willing to spend more money on new products simply because they want to have them first. So let's summarize at this point. We see that COVID-19 accelerates the use of technology. We developed a complete new digital lifestyle. Digitization keeps driving the demand in all areas of tech and durables, and the growth trend even widens as also the telecom sector is growing. So the future of work is shifting towards home office, and technical solutions can facilitate these trends. We also see that health and well-being is a huge mega trend, and products that support health issues are in strong demand, like fitness trackers, for instance. Furthermore, as we spend so much time at home, digital solutions should entertain the consumers. We saw that gaming is becoming the new social networks. And a huge trend as well that we already saw in the last years, and that's steadily on the rise, is sustainability. So consumers expect that companies act sustainably while offering convenient solutions. So this is very interesting because sustainability is important, but consumers also expect convenience. And last but not least, we talked about e-commerce, the rise of e-commerce and of omnichannel.
All right, so what's the outlook, right? I think the key word is volatility. So expect a lot of volatility in the tech market in 2021, simply because we had a lot of volatility last year. So for sure, for the first half year, we can expect still some growth, high demand. I showed you that. But what about the second half year, right? I think that's where it will become quite challenging, quite difficult, especially in Europe, not so much in emerging Asia, where we saw a weaker year, but in Europe, we had such a strong growth that the second half year will be very, very hard to beat. However, new technologies should make life easier, concentrate on the benefit, that will help a lot. And the good thing about the at-home focus is that these trends will not vanish right away when we are all vaccinated, right? People will stay at home, working from home much more than before. We heard about that. And hence, a certain degree of automation is needed, and a higher degree is needed. Of course, it doesn't go as far as losing autonomy or the creativity when cooking. So I think be mindful of the barriers, as well as reliability, privacy concerns, and price. And then overall, I think the year 2021 will be a good one again for the industry. Even if we don't have huge growth rates like this year in Europe, the bar has been risen, and we see markets have been growing, and the markets have been expanding so much that even if we see like a stable year this year, I think it would be a success. All right, so how do we get to all of these insights? So just quickly, what I was talking about was a lot of sales data, right? A lot of hard facts, and we call it GfK Market Intelligence. And with a lot of volatility this year, and our capability of updating, the trends every week by week, for a country, globally, on a regional level, on a product group level, this is very much helpful to navigate you through this pandemic and also post-pandemic. Petra, what about your solutions?
Yes, Consumer Life also helps you to understand the changes in consumer behavior. So first, it helps you to see what's coming. If you want to understand which key trends are impacting the consumers, then Consumer Life is a helpful data source. So we can tell you which trends arise, and we also can quantify these trends and show you how these trends affect your target group. Second, we help you to better understand your current target group, your current consumers and customers, and also it gives you information about how to address potential new target groups. And last but not least, we have a lot of information about different markets. We conduct a study in 25 countries, and this is especially interesting or important for you when you want to exploit opportunities in new markets or new regions. Then GfK Consumer Life helps you to better understand cultural differences in these markets. We offer different delivery models to our clients, so you can decide if you would like to use our online data access pool, if you would like to have customized consultancy, or we also offer our ready-to-use insight reports. And some of these reports I would like to introduce. We even have much more information. I would like to focus on 5 selected reports. The first is the Tech and Digital Lifestyle Market Brief that delivers comprehensive information about tech and durables in a single country. And we have these reports for all our 25 countries in the study. Second, we offer a smart home report that has a deep dive into consumer mindsets, attitudes, behaviors around smart home. Our Digital Life and Home report offers information about the changes in our digital life and in our home life. It includes information about usage of social media, of streaming services, apps, gaming, and much more. Our gaming report, we saw that gaming is a huge topic currently, and the gaming report describes consumers based on the usage of different gaming devices. So for instance, the smartphone, the tablet, computer, video game consoles, and we describe these different types of consumers. And last but not least, our GfK Green Gauge report. This is a report that covers the topic of sustainability. And what's especially interesting from my point of view is that this report contains a segmentation of consumers based on their attitude and activities around the topic of sustainability. So this report will help you to better understand consumer behavior in this area. Yeah, and now we are at the end of our presentation, and it's your turn. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Petra and Norva, and we're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. So the first question we have is regarding the new EU energy label that has started. How do you think this will change the market dynamics? Will it lead to selling more sustainable products on the market?
Okay, maybe I'll take that one on. Yes, I believe it is a good way or step forward. I mean, the whole objective of the new label is to make information even more transparent, particularly via the new QR code that can be scanned for every model, and the new Entrel database where consumers can access much more information than in the past, and particularly the much better differentiation, as Petra said, between the A to G scale is, of course, helping a lot to stimulate the consumer interest and the consumer demand for the best possible energy label class, and it pushes the manufacturers, of course, to more innovations and even better energy efficiency. So yes, it will provide an important step forward to more efficiency. On the other hand, we also have to admit that the underlying concept of energy per capacity, this is how the label is still be calculated, gives a benefit to larger appliances in terms of reaching a better energy label. That means that there's also quite a push on the large appliances side still inside of this label, because if you have a good label on a large appliance that is delivering performance to the consumer, you see the double benefit, right? You feel, the consumer feels to have a sustainable product as well as a high performing one. Bringing that together stimulates, of course, the purchase of large appliances, which in the end on an absolute level do consume potentially more energy and can offset some of the innovation savings that we get through better appliances.
Great, thanks Norbert. How much does COVID really influence consumer behavior? Won't a lot of things go back to the way they were before?
Yeah, that's the interesting questions, and yeah, I will take this question. So what we can see that COVID is actually accelerating specific trends that we already saw before. So for instance, health and wellness was already a big issue before COVID, but it's becoming even more important in the future from our point of view. Also sustainability, that's a topic we discussed a lot about. So sustainability is already very important, and we see that especially the young generation all around the globe is driving this topic, and environmental protection, climate change, these are huge topics. And yeah, this younger generation is expecting from companies that they act sustainably. We also saw that shopping behavior is changing towards online. Home office probably will stay. So yes, there are trends that will stay. But on the other hand, there has been a discussion about whether certain behaviors or lifestyles are correct, or if we should change these. And I think many people has really questioned their consumer behavior during the crisis, but the majority of people will probably change it very little, because basic values and attitudes are simply too stable for huge behavior and change. And as we know from our research, that people are looking forward to finally being able to restaurants again and to travel again, and yeah, to do something exciting in their free time.
Great. Someone's asked if they can access the reports mentioned through the portal.
Right, so let me maybe just clarify. We will definitely make all reports and also recording available, so you will get another communication. Everybody who registered will get an email tomorrow to be able to access all of these via a separate link. So everything will be available to you.
Perfect, great. And I think we've just got time for a couple more questions. Why do you have a perception that the first half of the year will behave much differently from the second half of the year in 2021? Is it due to regional dynamics?
Yeah, good question. So I think the simple answer is it is also a technical effect, because we saw such a strong second half year and a weak first half year. But you are absolutely right. It is also a regional topic. So it's basically two dimensions. Developed markets being very strong overall, especially Europe and other developed Asian regions. On the other hand, emerging Asian regions, for example, China, but also other Southeast Asian countries, especially India, which got hit very hard by the lockdowns, have had basically a pretty weak performance in 2020. That will kind of flip the coin in 2021, where we will see for sure a recovery of the emerging Asian market, which in general over the past years anyway have been more a growth driver than the developed markets, because of already the high penetration of goods in the more developed markets. So we will see that change again, that emerging markets will catch up, will recover, will deliver more growth in 2021 compared to the more developed markets.
Great, thank you. And finally, for which countries do you have information for in your consumer study?
Yeah, the Consumer Life Study is running every year in more than 25 countries. We have data for China, for India, for North and South America, Brazil, for instance, for Australia, South Africa, and many European countries.
Great, thank you. And I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you, Petra and Norbert. And thank you, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. On behalf of GfK and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and bye-bye. Thanks for joining.
Bye.